Next week, Saturday Cinema provides an opportunity to see almost all the Warner Brothers stars of the 30s and 40s in two films. At 2:10, Edward G. Robinson, James Cagney and Evelyn Knapp are in Smart Money, and later at 3:55, Hollywood Canteen features many of the people you might well have bumped into in such an establishment, in particular Joan Leslie, Robert Hutton, Dane Clark and Janice Page. That's next week. Tonight on 2, Pandora's Box, the silent screen masterpiece by G.W. Pabst, which made Louise Brooks a star overnight. This screen version of Frank Wedekin's play Lulu caused a sensation when it was released in 1928, and it was heavily censored in many parts of the world. Tonight there's a rare chance to see Louise Brooks' subtly erotic interpretation of Lulu, the prostitute who unwittingly inspires evil and who's been described as the personification of primitive sexuality. Pandora's Box is at 11:10 tonight, here on 2. And now Ludovic Kennedy and his guests review some of the past week's television in Did You See?
Who says the BBC doesn't advertise? Last Saturday's excellent Arena on BBC2 presented a profile shot in his home in Mexico of the film director John Huston to mark the publication of his autobiography. So far, so good. But 5 minutes later, Huston turned up in person on the Parkinson show to give the autobiography yet another plaque. Lucky old him. Among the big-time politicians given an airing was Attlee's Foreign Secretary Ernie Bevin, who once offered Lord Mountbatten the ambassadorship in Moscow, quite unaware that the communists had murdered all his Russian royal relations. Bevin was the subject of a Westwood television documentary, A Turn-Up in a Million, which examined both his public and somewhat enigmatic private life. Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the d'Estaing comes from an 18th century French admiral, who was in fact no relation, also came under scrutiny in last night's Newsweek, the 7-year switch, which came to the conclusion that le style est l'homme, the style is the man. In the documentary field, Jerry Troyner of BBC2 gave us 2 chilling films on special hospitals for people classified as both subnormal and violent and the criminally insane. As with the Strangeway series last year, these films made bleak viewing. Here's a man who stole £2 57 years ago.
Well, I was in holiday camp, you see, buying holiday stamps. I was paying £2, my father was paying half a dollar, and he took money in his name and went share out. Come, he wouldn't give me my share. And one night he was counting some money out of his wallet on half for our lass's wedding. So when he's at work next day, I takes a couple of pounds and I takes it to Ferd and spends it. He comes back from work next day and he finds his £2 missing. He goes to fetch his bobby. I went up to quarter sessions and Judge says the doctor has put me to quarter sessions. He says, is this man a mental defective? He says, no. He says, well, what are you certified him for then? So he said, oh, he's a moral defective. And the judge says, what's a moral defective? And the bloody doctor didn't know. He had to get the book out and read what it was. Somebody has no sense of shame in him, and I knew punishment has no deterrent effect. And I got 57 years on that count.
On a brighter note, Michael Wood returned to the English countryside on BBC2 on Thursday in search of more Dark Age heroes. His journey took him from Devon to Durham and Wiltshire, where at Malmesbury Abbey he searched for Athelstan, grandson of King Arthur, he of the Round Table. The world about us made a more hazardous journey to Papua New Guinea to look at the world's largest cave, which looked much like any other cave, only larger. Horizon on Monday went even further, into the universe to examine theories about intelligent life elsewhere, but happily the matter was left undecided. In the same general area, there were some new exits and entrances in Doctor Who. Since the series started in 1963, there have been 4 Doctor Whos, and the latest of them, Tom Baker, bowed out earlier this afternoon in spectacular style.
It's the end. But the moment has been prepared for.
The Watcher. was the doctor all the time.
The man ultimately responsible for Doctor Who and indeed all other drama productions at the BBC has for the past 12 years been Sean Sutton, who's soon to retire from that job. I'll be talking to him later in the programme about changes in drama during his term of office. But first, let's look at some of this week's programmes. The omnibus profile of the blind black singer Stevie Wonder. Denslow, thank you all very much. The BBC Drama Department produces 325 hours of drama every year. It's the largest drama department of any television company in the world, and by general consensus, far and away the best. For the last 12 years, its head has been Sean Sutton, who's been responsible for more than 5,000 separate productions, from Shakespeare to Shoestring, from the Brothers to the Borgias. Although he will continue to work for the BBC on a freelance basis, he is now stepping down from the head of the department. Sean Sutton, what you would say would be the major changes in the 12 years that you've been in charge of the drama department?
Well, I believe that television drama is now a separate art in itself. It's written for itself, it's acted for itself, directed for itself. And I think that the main thing that has happened in the last 10 years has been its sophistication and its polishing to a very high degree. This is the decade when the look of our television drama and its authority and its confidence has gained, so that it is now, as you have said, the best looking television drama in the world. There have been many other adjuncts to this. Regional drama, when I came into this job, I found that the regional studios, in fact, were being used mostly just to host drama that was created and rehearsed in London. Everyone got into a train and then went up to Birmingham or up to Scotland. And it seemed to me that regional theatre in England and in Scotland had become very strong. Every town had its theatre complex, and they were doing work that was comparable to the West End in London. And it seemed important to me to reflect this in BBC television drama. So we set up a drama department in Birmingham and charged them to do plays and serials, all for the network, not for local audiences. Too expensive to do just for local areas, all went for the network. And that has flourished enormously.
Now, the BBC drama department now has a very high reputation. I think all over the world it's considered to be about the best there is. How has this come about?
Well, it seemed to me that anyone who is put in charge of a very large artistic unit, and certainly the BBC Drama Group is that, the first duty is to create a climate in which the best talents and the best people will wish to work, will wish to not only come and work for you, but will come back and return again and again. In other words, a climate of artistic security, so that directors and producers can be bold and they can push out boundaries and dare and fail occasionally, and that's very important. We should allow young writers and directors to fail without the fear of not being asked again. And I tried to create, with the help of many colleagues, this climate in which people could relax and be bold.
You ever worried about running out of material? I mean, you mentioned about the high degree of production, which is perfectly true. I mean, lighting, costumes, acting, all these things are marvellous. Sometimes I wonder if the content matches up to the rest of those things.
Well, England, Britain, is a country that is rich in drama. We have a 400-year drama tradition in the theatre. People expect to see drama, and people expect to write it. I believe that we are very rich indeed in playwrights and actors and directors. There is no lack of material. It is up to us to harness it, to encourage it, and bring it into television.
How far does television drama reflect, on how much should it reflect the times in which we live?
Well, clearly, certain areas of television drama, particularly the new plays, must reflect what are the ills or abuses of the day. In other words, Play for Today, originally the Wednesday play, dealt with all matters like baby beating and wife beating and drugs and prostitution, all the ills of the day. And very important that we should boldly reflect all those things. On the other hand, I've always had a feeling that there is also a sort of countergraph by which when the country, as in the 50s and 60s, when everybody seemed to have enough money and things were going rather well, that was the time in the theatre and in television when we were in a way dramatically at our starkest. This was the time of the black comedies and the kitchen sink. It's very interesting that the other curve is beginning to take over now that conditions in England are more worrying. We're worried about our futures, worried about money, our children's futures and jobs. And there is a tendency in drama now to become not softer, but perhaps a little bit more human, a little bit more humorous, a little more romantic with the capital R.
What sort of plays do you have in mind there?
Well, I think that two spring to mind straight away in that Nanny, the success of Nanny, and the success of To Serve Them All My Days, both of which appealed as much to the heart as to the intellect, is very significant.
Now, from time to time, the public hear that some play or other has been banned. Brimstone and Treacle, I suppose, is the most famous example. Scum is another. What is your view about that?
Well, to start with, you can't make any rules about it. Every script is a separate creation and must be considered separately. Everybody regrets when a play has to be withdrawn, and I think it has only happened 4 or 5 times in the whole time that I've been head of the group.
Those two we've talked about, were you in agreement with that they shouldn't be shown?
I was in agreement with one and not so much in agreement with the other. I feel you can't make rules, but you can make a general sort of policy about television. Unlike the theatre, which you choose to go to, unlike the cinema, you choose to go there, or you pick up a book, you read it, you put it down. What you don't choose to do is always watch television. It goes into people's homes, it is switched on, and none of us can be absolutely certain who is in front of a set at any one time.
What do people, when people do complain about something in a play, what is it that they complain about most? Is it too explicit sex, too much violence, what?
It's usually language. The top of the complaint list, as you might say, sex and violence. Well, there are people who object to nudity and would object to any sort of nudity. There are people who object to any sort of violence. I believe that both sex and violence are very well controlled in television drama. But top of the complaints list always comes language. And that a man who will swear all day long and think nothing of it, if we swear in a play with his wife and his daughter and his son in the room, he will be embarrassed and he will write to us angrily.
Is the theatre still the best recruiting ground for actors and directors for television?
Well, it's a cross-fertilization. I think that all actors and all young television staff, stage managers, are better for having gone first into the theatre. This is the true training ground of the actor, and there is a tremendous cross-fertilization going on all the time, not only with actors, with directors and writers, moving between the various media.
Now, Sean, you're leaving as head of the department, but you're going on with the Shakespeare canon. Will you make any changes there in the production of the Shakespeare plays?
Well, I feel that in the last 12 plays under Jonathan Miller's producership, that we have got it right. I think the way that they are being done now is just the way they should be done, and therefore I would hope to continue that, and I would hope to keep the same team together.
You don't feel, sorry to interrupt you, I just going to say, you don't feel that there should be another dimension of going outside? I mean, I remember enjoying The Merchant of Venice very much, but feeling I wasn't on the Rialto. I wasn't seeing what television could give me, but which the theatre can't.
Well, I think you have either got to go the whole bust and build the entire Rialto in a studio, or go to Venice and do it there under impossible conditions with huge crowds. No, I think that Jonathan and I are very sure about this, that what we have to do for television Shakespeare is the text and the actors in the foreground, and use scenery and lighting in particular to emphasize those performances and emphasize the text. And I would hope to keep that up in the future.
Sean Sutton, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next week we'll be looking at Michael Wood's In Search Of series, which is looking for the Viking king Eric Bloodaxe on BBC2 on Thursday at 8:15. Tomorrow's World also on Thursday at 6:55 on BBC1. And Julian Pettifer's Nature Watch on ITV Monday at 7 o'clock. And in the week when BAFTA makes its annual television awards, we'll be asking what kind of television programs win prizes and why. So until next week, goodbye.
And next week's programme will be at the earlier time of 5:55. In a quarter of an hour, International Rugby Special features England versus France and Scotland versus Ireland. First, the news and sport with Jan Leeming.
A suspected outbreak of foot and mouth disease on the Isle of Wight. Just as Ministry of Agriculture vets grew optimistic that they'd contained foot and mouth in Jersey, came the reports from the Isle of Wight. Ministry vets have sealed off Hampstead Farm near Yarmouth and have banned all cattle movements within 5 miles. In Jersey there have been no cases since Thursday, but as John Walmsley reports, no one's taking any chances.
Jersey is now virtually an island under siege. All travellers to and from the island have to cross antiseptic mats laid down to stop the virus spreading. Ferry sailings to the mainland were held up as the mats were replaced at intervals to keep up maximum protection. Closely watched are the hydrofoil arrivals from France. New cases of foot and mouth have been reported in Brittany, and travellers to Jersey from St Malo could be virus carriers. At the farm where the outbreak first occurred, a field officer from the Ministry of Agriculture rechecked the cattle still remaining. Because the virus can be carried on clothing, he took no chances. On leaving the infected area, he scrubbed down to remove all traces from the farm. After spending 3 hours inside, he reported no further outbreak. As it's been 3 days since the virus was first reported, the Jersey authorities are cautiously optimistic. You've checked the cattle. Any sign of another outbreak?
No. Cats are perfectly healthy this morning.
How hopeful are you that on this particular farm the outbreak has been contained?
Oh, it's much too early days for this yet. Much too early days. We're still on a red alert, really.
The National Front say they will still march in Yorkshire tomorrow in spite of a ban by the Home Secretary. He's agreed to a demand from the South Yorkshire Police to ban all marches in the county for a week. The Front Secretary, Mr Martin Webster, says the march will happen somewhere in Yorkshire where there isn't a ban. The former leader of the Commons, Mr Norman St John Stevens, has warned Conservatives that they're faced with a particularly dangerous threat by the formation of a Social Democratic Party next week. To meet the challenge, he said, the Tories must occupy the broad central ground of British politics and retain their unity. The Tory Reform Group at Oxford were told by Mr St John Stevens that houses divided against themselves fall. He said Labour was responding to its ideological difference by splitting, and it was vital that the Conservative Party didn't do the same. Passengers at Gatwick Airport have suffered long delays for part of the day because of a work to rule by customs and immigration officers taking part in the civil servants' dispute. They lifted their action this morning and departures and arrivals are now back to normal, but they say they'll be taking further action later this weekend. The editor of The Observer says Tiny Rowland's latest plans to purchase the newspaper are unacceptable, and in an editorial in tomorrow's issue he's critical of the paper's present owners, Atlantic Richfield. Mr Donald Trelford said their efforts to flout the spirit, if not the letter, of the monopolies legislation were not the way for an American company to treat a British government or a British board of directors. At the very least it was discourteous and ill-advised, and the unacceptable face of multinationalism. Mr Tiny Rowland, Lonhro's chief executive, wants to purchase The Observer. He first arranged a deal involving one of Lonhro's subsidiaries. This offer would have been referred to the Monopolies Commission. Yesterday he said he planned to buy a 50% holding in the paper personally. Mr Trelford's leader in the paper won't be popular, he admits, with either its owners or Mr Rowland, but he said it was a considered judgment which he thought readers were entitled to know. In South Wales, heavy rain over the last 12 hours has brought serious threat of flooding to many areas. An emergency centre has been set up at Brecon, and all main roads into the town are now impassable. In Gwent and other counties, many rivers are reaching flood levels, including the Taff at Aberfan. On the English border, the River Wye is already 9 feet above its normal level. The Spanish Prime Minister, Senor Calvo Sotelo, has flown to the Basque country to pay tribute to an army colonel who was shot dead by ETA terrorists. Senor Calvo Sotelo's decision to visit Bilbao was seen as a show of government solidarity with the armed forces, where the political atmosphere is still tense after last night's attempted coup. The government believes that ETA could be trying to goad the army into staging another coup attempt, and the Defence Ministry said the shooting of the colonel could mean the start of a new offensive. The Polish government is holding talks in Warsaw tomorrow with leaders of the free trade union Solidarity. It's attempting to defuse the tension in the country caused by the violence in Bydgoszcz on Thursday, when 27 union members were injured, 3 seriously. There will also be local meetings in Bydgoszcz where Solidarity is calling for the dismissal of senior officials. Mr Lech Walesa, who will be attending the Warsaw talks, has already warned that a national strike is out of the question, but he has described the atmosphere in Poland as extremely serious. In Sicily, thousands of people living on the slopes of Mount Etna have been watching anxiously as the lava flow continues to threaten their homes, but it's moved only a few feet in the last 24 hours. The volcano's most violent eruption for 10 years began last Tuesday when a half-mile crack on the northern slope burst open. Lava and ash covered the mountainside. But as the lava flowed down the 11,000-foot mountain, its movement slowed because of the contours of the lower slopes. One river of lava stopped only a mile from the outskirts of the town of Randazzo, and a farmer was lucky when another stopped just a few feet from his home. The molten lava destroyed everything within its path, killing hundreds of cows and sheep and devastating many thousands of acres of farmland. But people will continue to live in Etna's shadow, as eventually the earth will become very fertile again. Now sport, and fears that thousands of fans would be disappointed after reports of wholesale ticket forgeries for today's big rugby union game at Twickenham were unfounded. Police found only 75 false tickets. For news of the game between England and France and the rest of today's sport, here's Bill Hamilton.
France scored all their points without reply in the first half, but England fought back magnificently in the second half. Even so, it's tries that mostly decide championships, and the only 2 went to France, both breakaways. England in the white strip, the commentator, Bill McLaren.
Pardo has sliced his kick, but there's still trouble for Marcus Rose. Codorniu and Pardo coming up quickly. Rose going into his own 22, and you see how quick he has to be. He kept his head well, though. But the Frenchmen are burst away, and Lapong is going to score from the line out. They've caught England out. It's good and steady, but Smith got a heel that was much too sharp. And Reeve, would you believe it? He must have arms like... And this is up to Berbizier. Oh, beautifully out to Laporte. There's a great chance here. Taken there by Bertrand. Now out there to Codorniu. Codorniu to Pardo. Pardo has scored the second try for France. And the whole of France goes absolutely mad.
Rose kicked his 4th penalty.
It's there.
But it wasn't enough. France won by 16 points to 12. Poor Ireland, favourites to win the International Championship 2 months ago, ended up with a wooden spoon at a rain-soaked Murrayfield. Scotland dominated play in the first half through an early drop goal, and then this brilliant try by Bruce Hay.
Now Tony Ward. Owen. Kenny hooks and intercepted by Bruce Hay. Chasing is Ward. A straight race for the line, and Hay's going to win it.
Scotland went into the second half 10 points clear, but Ireland picked themselves up with a brilliant interception by David Irwin.
Back in his 22, chasing hard McLennan. Irwin slipped out of the tackle twice, looks for the counter. Charged down by Irwin, under the post it'll be. The softest of tries, and Ireland are back with a vengeance.
Final score then, Scotland 10, Ireland 9. That left the international table looking like this. The championship clearly going to France, the rest on 4 points except Ireland, who end the season without a win. The race for the Football League Championship is as tense as ever. Ipswich and Aston Villa both lost on a day of surprises. Jimmy Nicholl was the man who brought Ipswich's long unbeaten run to an end with a brilliant winning goal in Manchester United's 2-1 success at Old Trafford. And Steve Archibald, with his 24th goal of the season, got Spurs second as Villa went down 2-0 at White Hart Lane. An own goal in the second half by Everton fullback John Bailey gave Liverpool victory in the Merseyside derby at Anfield. So Ipswich stay a point clear of Villa, with Southampton, West Brom and Liverpool closing the gap. Our cameras were at Filbert Street for the relegation battle between Leicester and Crystal Palace. Leicester, playing left to right, have scored fewer goals than any other First Division side. And today that lack of finishing power was again all too evident in the first half. Jim Melrose shared the fans' frustration. Minutes later, as Byrne's corner floated into the box, May outjumped everyone, but twice the Palace defence managed to scramble the ball clear. Leicester's hopes, though, began to soar just minutes into the second half. Some slack defensive work, and the ball fell perfectly for John O'Neill. Palace, outplayed for most of the match, hit back unexpectedly, with new signing Brian Basson laying on a rare chance for Price. Leicester, full of running, had several chances to regain the lead, but they couldn't find a way past Paul Barn. In the final minutes, Palace were under siege, but they held out for a 1-1 draw. A point Leicester could ill afford to drop, and one that may yet cost them their First Division place. With Brighton and Norwich both drawing at home, Leicester must be rueing those missed chances tonight. In the Second Division, Notts County's Ray O'Brien scored with a penalty to give them both points at home to Orient. Blackburn drew at Chelsea to pull a point clear of Grimsby in third place, and West Ham, despite dropping a point to Oldham, are still 9 points clear at the top. In Scotland, the League Cup holders, Dundee United, seemed to be cruising to another home win over St Mirren. But then, with just minutes to go, the game took an unexpected turn. The commentator is Alistair Alexander.
Abercrombie, fine pass. Logan, the substitute, trying to drift into a shooting position. He's got a lot to do, and he's forced wide. He wins a corner off Copel. Little Alan Logan. Richardson curling it in, and in it goes. Yes, no. The referee is going to check with the linesman. He's not sure. It's given.
St Mirren went on to win 2-1, and Scottish viewers can see highlights of that game on Sports Scene tomorrow afternoon. Despite that defeat, Dundee United stay in third place, but Celtic now seem assured of the championship. The weather continues to dog England's Caribbean tour. Rain prevented any play before lunch in the 4-day match in Montserrat, but a short time ago the Leeward Islands were put into bat. It's probably the first and last time in the tour that all 5 Yorkshiremen will get a chance to play together with Bill Athy, ready-made number 3, replacing Brian Rose. And the latest score we have is Leeward Islands 31 without loss. Play did start on time at the women's international hockey match at Wembley. More than 61,000 people saw England's Janet Juriska score the winning goal with a 67th minute penalty to make the final score 2-1 for England, dashing Wales's hopes of their first draw.
Finally, if your diary suggests you put your clocks forward tonight for British summertime, don't do it. If you do, you'll be an hour ahead of everyone else for a week, as Michael Cole reports from Dalkeith.
15 million diaries a year are made by Britain's biggest manufacturer, and this year they're all wrong, showing the start of British summertime at midnight tonight. The official announcement of the change from this Sunday to next, to comply with an EEC commitment to standardise summertime, didn't reach the manufacturers until last July, when they'd already printed the 1981 diaries, and it was too late to do anything.
There have been times in the past when we have literally had to paste in an errata slip, but this was too late to happen. We have, however, corrected it for 1982 editions of our diary range.
This year the men from Brussels have been quicker off the mark. British summertime in 1982 begins, if you care to take a note, on Sunday, March the 28th. But having said that, oughtn't it really to be now European summertime?
Very confusing. That's the news. I'll be back with the late news at 11 o'clock, and I leave you with a look at the weather chart.
Well, England and Wales will be wet and windy tonight.